All right, so let's jump into this deep dive. Today, we're looking at some pretty interesting stuff, kind of where cryptocurrency meets that whole U.S.-China relationship thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things you can't really ignore anymore,
Uh,
right?
So we're going to be looking at a few different things. First, we'll kind of get a feel for the economic landscapes in both the U.S. and in China.
Always good to set the stage, right? See what we're working with.
Exactly. Then we'll look at some recent U.S. pardons of Chinese nationals.
Always a little bit of a mystery there. A lot of speculation.
Yeah, and then we'll tie it all together. How all this stuff could actually impact the crypto world, especially if things get a little tense over in Taiwan.
Yeah, that's the big question mark, isn't it, Taiwan?
It is, and the argument we're diving into here. Well, it's saying that this U.S.-China conflict. Well, even though nobody really wants that, it could actually lead to people using a lot more cryptocurrency. Kind of interesting, huh?
It's definitely a thought-provoking argument. It makes you really think about how global events could shape the future of finance. It's pretty wild, huh?
Yeah, it is. All right, so our source, they don't waste any time, getting into the nitty-gritty.
Hmm.
They point out that spending in the U.S. under Biden,
Yeah.
well, it's like it's never been higher, even more than during Trump's years.
Wow.
And they even say,
Mm.
that it's like we're blowing up this economic balloon bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and we all know what happens to balloons eventually, right?
Right, they burst, meaning
Well, it could mean some pretty serious inflation, like your money just doesn't buy as much anymore. It just loses its value.
it's just definitely not good. Okay, so then the source, they go on to compare the U.S. economy with China's. And their argument, China's on its way to becoming like the biggest economy in the world.
Yeah, they're not just talking about like the raw numbers though. They're talking about what's called purchasing power parity. It's like even if China's economy looks smaller on paper, their massive population means they have a huge amount of buying power.
So, like, even if their individual incomes are lower, their sheer numbers make them a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. And that's something you got to factor in, especially when you're thinking about how global shifts could impact your investments.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so then the source, they shift gears a little bit and start talking about some political stuff. They bring up Biden pardoning a Chinese national. And get this guy had been convicted of, possessing child pornography.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah. And it gets even more interesting when you consider the source's claim that this guy was, get this, a Chinese spy.
A spy, huh?
And
See, this is where things get a little murky, you know? International espionage, it's a whole different ball game. Governments use all sorts of things as bargaining chips in these situations, pardons, prisoner exchanges, you name it.
so you're saying this pardon could just be a small piece of a much bigger puzzle.
It's possible. There could be a whole lot more going on behind the scenes than we realize.
Okay, so then the source, they go on to suggest that these pardons could be part of like a bigger deal. They say that maybe China's holding back some info, maybe even something damaging about the Biden family.
Oh, wow.
And in exchange, well, the U.S. kind of lets them do what they want with Taiwan.
Whoa, that's a pretty bold claim, but I mean, we can't ignore the history here. The U.S. and China, they've got a long and complicated relationship, and Taiwan's right in the middle of it all.
That's like the elephant in the room, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you could say that. Taiwan's strategic importance. Well, it can't be overstated. Any change to the situation there could really shake things up globally.
All right, so the source, they make the case that for China, it's not just about, wanting more land.
Mm.
They say that taking Taiwan is about breaking free from what they see as like, the U.S. kind of boxing them in militarily.
Yeah, they feel surrounded, right?
Exactly. And they say it's about protecting their trade routes. They need to keep those open for their economy to keep growing.
Makes sense. Those shipping lanes, those choke points,
Yeah.
they're lifelines for global trade. And any conflict over Taiwan, well, it could really mess things up. It could disrupt supply chains, impact the entire global economy, really.
Right. So then the source, they bring it back to crypto. They say that, a war over Taiwan, obviously nobody wants that. But they say if it does happen, it would probably cause crypto prices to drop at first.
Yeah, makes sense. Fear and uncertainty, they don't exactly create a stable investment environment.
But here's the thing. They say that drop, it would probably be temporary. And after that,
Hmm.
they think crypto could actually recover, even surge in value. Yeah, because they think investors would start looking for safer places to put their money, places outside of the traditional financial systems, places that are maybe a little more stable when things are crazy.
So they're saying that In a way, a conflict could actually make crypto even more appealing to investors.
Exactly. Because it's decentralized.
Right.
It's not tied to any one country or government. It's like this life raft in a storm, you know?
I get the analogy. Okay, so then the source, they bring it all back to the people, specifically the Chinese people.
Right. They say that right now, not that many people in China actually own cryptocurrency, but they think that could change and change fast.
Why? What would cause that?
Well, they say there's this growing distrust of the Chinese government. People want to feel more secure about their finances. And crypto, it kind of offers that. It's like this shield against, against things going wrong.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see how that would be appealing, especially in a situation where people are feeling a lack of control, like they need to
Yeah,
protect themselves.
exactly. And then the source gets even more specific. They actually name some cryptocurrencies that they think Chinese citizens would really go for. They say XRP, HBAR, XLM, and of course Bitcoin. They think these cryptos have a good mix of good features, good security, and a lot of potential for growth.
So they're not just talking about any cryptocurrency. They're picking specific ones that they think align with the needs and the anxieties of the Chinese population.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they even compare it to what's happening in Vietnam, where people are already using a lot of cryptocurrency.
All right, they see some parallels there, huh? Culturally, economically.
Yeah. So it all comes down to this. They believe that, this whole decentralized finance thing, DeFi, that's going to be huge in China because it gives people a way to kind of escape the control of the government and participate in this whole new financial system,
Mm.
a system that's, it's more transparent, more open, and maybe even a little bit more fair.
Right. So basically, they're saying that DeFi could be a game changer in China. It could empower individuals in ways that traditional finance just can't. It's almost like a revolution in the making.
Exactly.
So, before we get too deep into these specific cryptocurrencies that our source is talking about, I think it's important to kind of step back and really think about the scale of what we're discussing here. We're not just talking about a few percentage points in the market or something. We're talking about potentially like a total shift in the global balance of power.
Yeah, it's almost hard to wrap your head around, right? I mean, we're talking about these digital tokens, these like lines of code basically, and they could have this huge impact on this massive power struggle between like the two biggest superpowers in the world. It's kind of wild when you
I
think
think
about it.
it really is. And
Yeah.
and what's interesting is that, our source, they're arguing that these specific cryptos like XRP, HBAR, XLM, and Bitcoin, they're not just some like abstract technological thing. They could actually be like tools for people to actually navigate this world that's becoming more and more unpredictable and chaotic. Let's start with XRP. Our source points out that it's specifically designed for like really fast and cheap international transfers, which in a world where things are kind of falling apart financially speaking, could be a really valuable thing to have.
So like let's say you're someone living in China and you're worried about, the government putting restrictions on how much money you can move around or you're not sure if the Chinese yuan is going to hold its value.
Yeah.
XRP could be a way for you to move your money out of the country quickly and without too much hassle.
Exactly. And it's not just about like avoiding restrictions either. XRP has actually already been used by some financial institutions because it makes cross-border payments so much easier and cheaper. Imagine like being able to send money to someone in another country and it's as easy as sending a text message. That's the kind of potential that XRP has and it's something that a lot of people, especially people who are looking for more financial freedom, could really be drawn to.
Right, right. So what about HBAR and XLM? What makes them different or why are they important in this whole, potential global shift thing?
Well, both of those, both HBAR, which is the cryptocurrency that runs on the Hedera Hashgraph network,
Yeah.
and XLM, which stands for Stellar Lumens, they're known for being really fast
Hmm.
and having like really low transaction fees, and they're really focused on financial inclusion. So it's about making it easier for everyone to send and receive money, no matter where they are or whether they have access to a bank or not.
So it's like they're almost designed for a world where the traditional ways of doing things just aren't working anymore. Like they're anticipating a future where the old systems are just not going to cut it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Our source seems to be suggesting that these cryptocurrencies are more than just like investments. They're tools that can give people more control over their money in a world where things can feel pretty out of control.
Right, right. And then of course we can't forget about Bitcoin. the OG crypto, the one that started it all. Our source sees Bitcoin as like a safe haven for people in China who are worried about the economy or the government, and they want to protect their money.
Yeah, Bitcoin's been called digital gold, you know? It's like a store of value that can protect you against inflation and economic downturns. And because there's only a limited amount of Bitcoin and it's not controlled by any government, it's very resistant to manipulation. So, if you're worried about the value of your country's currency or you think the government might try to take control of your money, Bitcoin could be a pretty attractive option.
So we have all these different cryptocurrencies, and each one of them has like its own unique features, and they all seem to like appeal to people in China for different reasons. But our source, they don't just talk about the tech stuff.
Yeah.
They also get into the psychology behind all of this, The reasons why people might start using crypto, like the distrust of the Chinese government and the need to feel secure about your finances.
Yeah, and that's where this story gets really fascinating. It's not just about the technology, it's about the human element.
Mhm.
It's about people trying to find some control, some security, some freedom in a world where those things are getting harder and harder to come by.
It's like they're looking for something, anything that can help them protect themselves and their families, and maybe crypto is that something.
Maybe it is. And our source even points to Vietnam as an example. Cryptocurrency is already really popular in Vietnam, and they see some similarities between Vietnam and China. Like, both countries have seen a lot of economic growth recently. They both have a
Mhm.
growing middle class, and people in both countries are looking for more financial freedom. So, they think that China could follow the same path as Vietnam,
Yeah, well,
that we could see a huge increase in crypto adoption there.
it makes you wonder, like, what would happen if that actually did play out on a global scale? If China really did embrace crypto in a big way, what would that mean for the future of finance? Would it challenge the dollar as the world's like main currency?
Okay.
Could it speed up the development of blockchain technology all over the world? I mean, those are some pretty big questions.
They are big questions, and
Hmm.
and I don't think anyone really knows the answers yet. But what we can say for sure is that the world of finance is changing, like really changing, and all these old systems, they're being challenged, and there are all these new possibilities emerging.
And our source is saying that crypto is right at the heart of all of this,
Yeah.
driven by all these geopolitical tensions and people just wanting more control over their own lives. So it's a bold statement for sure, but it's definitely worth thinking about as we try to make sense of all this.
It is. And before we move on, I think it's worth circling back to that idea of a conflict between the US and China and how that might affect the crypto market because even though war is a terrible thing, our source actually suggests that a conflict, especially if it involves Taiwan, could actually lead to more people using cryptocurrency in the long run.
Yeah, I remember that. But it still seems kind of strange, right? I mean, wouldn't the war just make everyone panic and sell off all their crypto because it's too risky?
Well, it's possible that we would see a drop in crypto prices at first, yeah,
Hmm.
as people get scared and uncertain about the future. But our source thinks that drop would only be temporary. They think that after the initial shock, people would start to rethink things. Like they might start to lose trust in the traditional financial system, and they might start to look for safer places to put their money. And that's where crypto could come in.
So it's like the very things that some people see as weaknesses of crypto, like the fact that it's not controlled by any government, that it's decentralized, those things could actually become strengths in a world where everything's falling apart.
Exactly. Our source thinks that crypto is actually very resilient. It's resistant to censorship, to manipulation, and to all the kinds of disruptions that can happen in the traditional financial system. So in a way, it could be a source of stability in a very unstable world.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It kind of makes you question everything you thought you knew about money and finance.
It does, doesn't it? And it really underscores how important it is to understand the connections between geopolitics, economics, and these new technologies like crypto. Because we live in a very complex world and everything is connected. And the decisions that governments make, the decisions that corporations make, the decisions that individuals make, they can all have like these ripple effects that spread out across the globe.
Right. And speaking of ripple effects, our source also talks a lot about decentralized finance or DeFi. They think DeFi is going to be really appealing to people in China because it gives them a way to kind of escape the control of the centralized system and participate in something that's more open and transparent.
Yeah, DeFi is all about cutting out the middleman. It lets people borrow money, lend money, and trade cryptocurrencies without having to go through banks or other financial institutions, which a lot of people see as being kind of shady or bureaucratic or just prone to being manipulated.
So it's basically like it's like democratizing finance,
Yeah.
It's giving people more control over their own money, and it's letting them bypass all the gatekeepers of the old system.
That's a good way to put it. And in a world where people are losing trust in those gatekeepers, whether it's governments or banks or big corporations, DeFi offers a really compelling alternative.
Mm.
It lets people participate in a global financial system that's based on transparency, on open source code, and on peer-to-peer interactions.
It sounds like DeFi could be really disruptive, not just in China, but everywhere. It makes you wonder, like, can it actually create a fairer, more accessible financial system? Or are there, like, hidden risks and challenges that we need to be aware of? I mean, it's all pretty new and uncharted territory, right?
It is, and those are definitely some important questions to consider. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's a good idea to kind of recap what we've talked about so far. We've been looking at the possibility of conflict between the U.S. and China and the potential for Chinese citizens to start using more cryptocurrency, and we've touched on the role that DeFi could play in all of this.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, I know. And we've only just scratched the surface of this whole thing. But I think it's clear that this is a really fascinating topic, and it has the potential to really change the world. But you know what? Let's take a little break here and give everyone a minute to think about what we've talked about so far. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive.
Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to kind of process everything we've been talking about. It's a lot, right? It's like this potential, I don't know, financial earthquake or something, all these global power shifts happening and people making these individual choices.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, yeah. We've been talking about potential conflicts, these new financial systems popping up and people looking for new ways to, like, handle their money. What really sticks out to you as the biggest thing here?
You know, what really hits me is how this whole thing shows just how much power individuals actually have. Our source, they say that people in China might start using crypto, not just because it's a good investment, but because it's a way to, like, take back some control in a system that feels like it's closing in on them. It's like that human need to feel like you have some say in things, even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control.
Totally. It reminds us that even with all this, like, global stuff happening, economic uncertainty, all that, people still have choices. They can choose to be part of systems that match their values, what they need, their vision for the future.
And that brings us back to those big ideas we started with. How are the US and China going to get along or not? What happens if there's a conflict? And is crypto going to turn the whole financial system upside down?
We talked about those economic and political tensions, right? Like between these two superpowers.
Yeah.
And Taiwan being that potential flashpoint. And then there's that idea that a conflict, even though it would be awful, could actually make more people turn to crypto. It's definitely complicated.
Our source, they lay out this scenario where all these things come together at once. You've got economic uncertainty, political distrust, new technology. And they think that could create, like, the perfect conditions for crypto to take off, especially in China. It's a bold prediction, but it really makes you think about the future of money and who has power in the world.
It's like, what if this isn't just like a temporary thing? What if this is actually the start of a whole new way of thinking about money and value and control, like on a global scale?
The source even brings up Vietnam, where people are already using a lot of crypto. They say that China could end up going down that same path. Both countries have had a lot of economic growth, a growing middle class, and people want more financial freedom. Those things, plus that distrust of institutions, well, it could make crypto really appealing.
And then there's, DeFi, decentralized finance. Our source says that's going to be a big draw, especially for people who want to, like, get around those traditional financial gatekeepers. It's almost like there's this whole other financial world being built where people have more control over their money and they don't have to rely on those old intermediaries.
It's wild to think about the possibilities, right? If DeFi keeps growing, it could change, like, everything about finance. Imagine a world where it doesn't matter where you live or your social status or what some big institution decides. You just have access to financial services.
It's a powerful idea, and it really challenges the way the system works now. But, like, with any big change, there are going to be bumps in the road. Risks, things we don't expect, It's uncharted territory, so we have to be careful and think things through.
Okay, so as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways here? What should our listeners be thinking about with all these trends happening?
I think the biggest thing is stay informed. The world's changing fast, and we got to understand what's going on. Think critically about the information we get and talk about what it all means.
Absolutely. And remember, what you do matters. Even something that seems small, like, checking out different financial systems, supporting these decentralized technologies, even just talking about these issues, it can all contribute to a better, more resilient future.
And lastly, don't be afraid of the unknown. The future isn't set in stone. It's made up of the choices we all make right now. So be curious, stay involved, be open to whatever comes next.
This deep dive, we hope it gave you some things to think about, and hopefully it made you think critically about the stuff that's shaping the world, because the future of finance, technology, geopolitics, it's being written right now. And we're all part of that story.
Thanks for joining us. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep talking about these things. Until next time, stay curious.